words of my mouth and meditations of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. So I'm a little out of breath. Chip and I have this wonderful plan that's always worked beautifully where I hang out with the 9:30 service families for a little bit after 9:30 service during the coffee hour, and then say goodbye to them, and then sneak in during usually the psalm. And I was looking at the clock while chatting with some people, and then I hear this, Daniel! And it sounds like, Chip, you should be in the service. I still have time, right? And he's like, you have to preach. The gospel's being read right now. And so I had to just run over. So I'm here. So we make plans. Yeah. And this actually fits perfectly with the sermon. I want to begin the sermon with a wonderful quote from a Jewish sage named Woody Allen, who says, if you want to make God laugh, tell him about your plans. So I think God was laughing at our plans today as well. And I love this saying. I think it's got an origin from the Yiddish saying, which is Mensch tracht und Gott lacht, which is we plan and God laughs. And many believe this saying has its roots in the Psalms, especially Psalm 2, in which God laughs at the plans and plots of the nations. And in this morning's psalm, which you just heard or sang, you encounter someone who is boasting of his plans to enjoy life completely unperturbed, saying, I shall never be disturbed. God has made me as strong as the mountains. And yet in the next verse, his plans are quickly upset by the experience of an overpowering fear. And then Psalm 33:10 says it most blatantly, God frustrates the plans of the people. We plan and God laughs. And in our reading from 2 Kings, which we talked about with the children, which is very fun, we encounter another example of a man's frustrated plans. The man's name is Naaman. Naaman. The kids had fun saying that. Kind of sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Naaman. It's got that guttural, Naaman. But if you can't say that, you can just say Naaman. So we'll just call him Naaman. When Naaman learns of a prophet in Israel, he learns from his young Israelite maiden girl. He learns of a prophet in Israel who can cure him of his leprosy. He plots his healing out to a T, which we learn about. He expects the prophet to greet him with open arms, conjure the power of the Israelite God, and then perform a shamanic healing ritual over his leprous skin in order to enact a dramatic and magnificent cure. However, the Israelite prophet Elisha does not even give him the courtesy of greeting him at the door. Instead, he sends a messenger to tell him to wash 7 times in the Jordan, a muddy river that pales in comparison to the beautiful rivers of Naaman's Syria. And Naaman is, of course, outraged, not only because of Elisha's peculiar instructions to basically wash in mud, and his apparent lack of hospitality, which is a serious offense in Near Eastern culture. He is also outraged because things simply are not going according to his plan. He wants to be healed of his leprosy, but he also expects to be healed according to his schedule and his sense of custom and aesthetics. And thanks to the advice of his intrepid servants, he decides to let go of what he had planned and to follow the prophet's instructions, no matter how bizarre and humiliating. As a result, he ends up completely healed of his leprosy, with skin like that of a young boy, as the text says. So there's these wonderful baptismal themes that we can glean. Naaman learns that God's healing is at work, even when almost nothing goes according to his plan. Naaman learns the spiritual lesson that mythologist Joseph Campbell invites us to learn when he says, we must be willing to let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. These words have been a consistent source of challenge and encouragement to me over the years, especially since I often make plans that simply don't work out. I guess I make God laugh all the time. Although occasionally some things do work out according to plan, like the wedding surprisingly went smoothly. I have found that to be the exception to the rule. For instance, my ordination process felt very long and sometimes frustrating and did not necessarily follow my preferred schedule. It was about a 7-year process, give or take, and I often felt like I was walking through muddy and opaque waters. And I am now in the 7th year of my doctoral program and hoping against hope that I will soon be healed of the leprosy that is dissertation writing. Now, perhaps I'm being a little melodramatic, but I think we can all relate to Naaman to a certain degree as we find ourselves sometimes wallowing in the mud of frustrated plans. And yet healing does come as we learn to let go of the life that we have planned and embrace the thrilling and unexpected adventures of the life that is waiting for us. Joseph Campbell also said provocatively, if the path before you is clear, you're probably on someone else's. It is often the adventures that are the most unexpected and unplanned that prove to be the most transformative and healing. And it is often when our future seems most obscure and uncertain that the God of surprises, in the words of Desmond Tutu, will play his most extraordinary and incredible card. So why make plans at all? As much as I like the idea of making God laugh with my ill-fated schemes, I'd rather be working in cooperation with God's will and plan for my life. And I find some helpful guidelines for making plans in this morning's collect and in this morning's gospel. The collect reminds us that we can follow all of God's commandments by simply loving Him and loving our neighbor. So let our love for God and others serve as a lamp to light our path and guide our plans. And by cultivating a loving, wholehearted devotion to God and fostering a pure affection for one another, as the collect says, we inevitably cooperate with God's will and plan for our lives. And that's what we do here. We cultivate that love for God and others. And when it comes to the details, however, I find the gospel to be especially helpful. In appointing his disciples to be traveling healers, Jesus gives them peculiar instructions, as we learn that Hebrew prophets are wont to do. He says, carry no purse, no bag, no sandals, and greet no one on the road. Offer peace. If it is rejected, don't worry about it. Eat what is set before you. If people welcome you, bless them and heal them. If they reject you, then just let it go. Let go even of the dust that clings to your feet, and then move on. Underneath the initial peculiarity of these words, I hear Jesus inviting us to do what former presiding Bishop Catherine Jefferts Schori would often say: travel light, meaning be open, be adaptable. In other words, make your plans to love God and love your neighbors, but hold all the details lightly. Be willing to be surprised and be vulnerable to unexpected adventures, including rejection. Make your plans, but hold them lightly, because they will ultimately make way for God's plans. As a result, the disciples have the time of their lives. They return overflowing with joy because they tapped into God's healing power. They let God's plans override and overwhelm their own, and subsequently they brought freedom and wholeness and new life to all who received them. So let us go ahead and make our plans prayerfully and pursue them, guided by love for God and neighbor. And even though they might seem like the most holy, God-ordained plans in the world, let us still be prepared for them to be frustrated, so that they might become even more fully aligned with God's wonderful plans for us. Let us also be willing to immerse ourselves in the muddy and unclear waters of the Jordan in order to be transformed by the God of surprises, who ultimately seeks to heal us and to heal the world through us. And we can hold ourselves and our plans lightly and even learn to laugh joyfully and rejoice with the God who laughs at our plans because we know our names are written in heaven. And we can rejoice with the psalmist whose upset plans led him to a renewed intimacy with God, with a God who seeks to turn all of our mourning into dancing and to make our hearts sing forever. Amen.